Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, we're talking with Michael Longstreet, who's running for the Beach City Commission, seat 4.
Exactly.
Thanks for coming. And normally we like to ask if you can just start out by introducing yourself and telling us who you are, and if you want to follow up on that way, why you're sitting there and why you want to do the Beach City job.
All right. Well, I'm a native Floridian and have been a resident of St. Augustine Beach for 22 years. I raised my sons on St. Augustine Beach, involved in the community, enjoying the beach and enjoying our neighborhood and enjoying our tight-knit little community. And I've always liked serving the community. I served as a member of our St. Augustine Beach Beautification Advisory Committee, and I ran for election and won the exact same seat and served from 2002 to 2006 on the City Commission. And I'm interested in serving our city again on the Commission to help continue to make our city a community that we all love to live in and visitors still love to come to.
Okay. I have to ask you this, and I should know this, but when you were in the City Commission for the 4 years, 2002, 2006.
Yes, I was.
Did you quit, or did the voters quit you?
I ran for re-election, and another resident, Brud Hilhowski, campaigned, was my opponent. He did win the election. He had more voters. Was a little more well known because he also runs Jack's Barbecue on A Street. He has served 8 years on the commission, and he's not running for re-election. And I elected to run again for a seat on the commission because there are things that started with the vision plan that we had created when I was on the commission 10 years ago that have been sitting and not really being acted on while the economy was tight because we didn't want to overuse any of the city's money. And the time has come for us to try and make some things on the vision plan happen to improve the walkability and livability of our city. And there are things that we can do in that manner that aren't going to require raising taxes or really tightening the belt on our budget at all, but there is room in our city's finances to really do some things to improve our city.
I'll ask you one more because you walked into it. How are you going to make it more livable and more walkable, a better city, and not spend any more money on it?
Well, we have money in our budget, and with the increase in values, as property values are doing their normal increase, with this tax year, they voted to hold with the same millage numbers and not go with the rollback rate, which is going to bring a little bit more money into the city. With the two new developments that are coming into the city, the Marriott that's already been approved and they're starting clearing of the land and starting construction, and the development that will go in where the beachfront resort had been, that's a property owned by Key International now, they have not yet proposed a plan for what they're going to build. But with both of those properties, it will bring more tax revenue into the city without us increasing our tax rate. And with those properties, there are some things that the city should be able to negotiate with them without giving away anything, but to have them improve the areas around where they're building to increase walkability and increase access. For instance, with the Marriott Hotel, hopefully it's in discussion with them somewhat. All right, I brought it up, and I'm not on commission yet, but I brought it up at the last meeting as things were being planned with them to consider widening the sidewalk because they will be redoing the sidewalk for the 2.5 blocks in front of where they're doing their development. And I proposed to Gary Larson, our building department director, to review with them if they would put in a wider, little more walkable sidewalk than what the city currently has. That is a county road. State Road A1A is a county road. So major road work has to go through approval and be done by the county pretty much. But when this developer is doing the sidewalk, they could put it a little further away from the edge of the road, make it a little bit wider so that people coming along that stretch feel a little more comfortable walking and may feel more like coming out and walking along the boulevard there, running along the boulevard, riding their bicycles, to make it a little more just comfortable for people to enjoy coming out to.
trucks, where are you on that one?
That is an issue I believe the city does need to really take a
Yeah,
in-depth look into. My position, though, is that I don't want to bring something new into the city in the manner of food trucks or mobile vending service that will work against our existing businesses.
so you're against food trucks?
Only
That
if they
takes a
sell
little bit of
food.
research. I think that we just need to do a little deeper research on it. The fact that one issue that I completely see with food trucks in our city, because two of my sons are in New York, there's lots of food trucks up there, but I do note there are issues of where they park, where they can stay, how long they can stay in one spot. And for instance, along Beach Boulevard, which is our most active stretch for pedestrian traffic that food trucks would serve, we do not have enough right of way for them to be able to stop right along the road. That would not be safe or legal. We do not have very many public parking lots for the city. The Pier parking lot is county. We do have a couple other smaller parking lots, but it would not be right to take away spots in our off-beach parking for a food truck to park when there's people that want to park there to go to the beach. So the issue of having food trucks is more of whether they're really viable to make the type of business that they might want to have in our city as compared to Jacksonville Beach, Daytona Beach, New York. And so I'm still of the position that it needs to be researched, but I'm not sure that we can see any way to make it viable except for, as it does right now, are food trucks allowed at the special events like the Wednesday market, and when we have arts shows at the Pier Park and various things like that, at Beach Blast Off. Those are things that, we allow food vendors, food trucks to come set up. But on a daily basis, on a open permit to come through on a daily basis, even if we set up guidelines and said, okay, we'll allow you to come through here, I don't see that any food truck would be able to come through and make a viable profit off of doing business on our beach. So I'm not sure that even if we said we'll have food trucks, that they would work out. So I'm not of the position right at the moment, as I'm looking into it, to say right now we have to outlaw food trucks. But I don't see that if we do it, we have to have it in a safe and viable way. And that's going to be very tricky to come up with anything that would be safe and viable on a regular basis other than the special events market that we have. The Wednesday concerts, the Wednesday market in the mornings, any other special events that we have, like Beach Blast Off. And then we're already allowing them for that, so I'm not sure that we have to go through a complete rewrite of something different for what we're already allowing them for.
Okay. How are you going to juggle the growing tourism industry with the residents? How is that going to work out if you're on city commission?
It generally works very well on its own. However, that's as I've been campaigning, there have been many residents that talk to me about being able to access the beach well. And that's one of the things on some of our streets, in some of our areas, that the city really needs to look into improving pedestrian access. That so many of our streets have a 30-foot or 40-foot right-of-way, and once you have the 20-foot paved roadway for motorized vehicles, there's not a lot of room for improved pedestrian access. But we do have roadways that we can improve and designate more as a pedestrian path. And we do have some areas that we can provide more parking near the beach. And I already have a plan that will come out if I'm elected of ways to double the available on-street parking on just a few of the streets, have enough right-of-way where something can be done.
Why not share the plan now while you're running?
I guess I could give you some concept of it.
Okay.
Like I said, two of my sons are in New York.
Okay.
One of the common things on even some of the smaller streets in New York, to make more space than just simple parallel parking, is angle parking, or even more specifically reverse angle parking. Mm-hmm. And I do understand, because I've researched a little bit in Florida, because we only have rear license plates, that in some areas there's a concern about doing reverse angle parking because you can't look at the license. The police can't check license plates for validity, the thing that sometimes they do just driving around looking to see if tags expired. But for parking just along the beach, on some of the roads that have enough of a shoulder for it, access-wise, to be able to turn around, it would be easier for vehicles to get in and out with reverse angle parking, because although there's quite a few people that have a concern about backing up, you have to back up to get out of the parking spot if you just pull in forward, and then you're not seeing what's behind you. If you go ahead instead and back into an angled parking spot, then you have full, clear vision to be able to pull out safely. And it can be lined up to get more cars into some of the areas than we currently have, allowing just simple parallel parking.
What would your top 3 projects be that you'd like to see accomplished, as you mentioned in your introduction? Maybe not necessarily in order, but what your top 3 wish list would be?
Probably my number one wish on my wish list would be a better parking plan before the next beach season. We have had a parking plan. They did have a commission a parking plan review to be done, and I read that through, and I still came up with more ideas, like I said, with angle parking or other ideas such as that weren't included in that plan. I think there are some things that the city could do to make it quite a bit safer for parking in the beach, and provide some more areas for off-beach parking safely. Second plan is, as I've mentioned, providing on some of our streets a little bit more safe pedestrian access for our residents to be able to walk to the beach or ride bikes in the area. And third would be enhancing the trolley system and public transportation for our area that was done on a trial basis with the beach concerts and the beach season right at the end of this summer that was just started. It didn't come out with very large numbers, but any program that you just start out takes a little while for people to get used to.
You're talking about the shuttle?
The shuttle that was used for the concerts and that was used on the weekends to get people to the beach when they couldn't find parking at the Pier parking lot or right at the beach. And both shuttles eventually grew to where the numbers were beginning to work out, but they were started so late in the season that it wasn't something that everybody expected to keep happening and used on a regular basis. And I could see very well helping our parking on the beach also by having a shuttle that, for instance, went around the plaza downtown, even if it just picked up in the area of the plaza downtown that's close enough to quite a few of the hotels where people stay in the downtown area, and came down to the beach to let people off at the beach. And if it ran on a regular time basis where they knew, I can pick up the shuttle here at the plaza and get down to the beach, and a couple hours later I'd be able to the shuttle will pick me back up at the beach to take me back downtown to my hotel, or at least to the plaza where I'm close to walking distance to my hotel. It will save a lot of small individual vehicular traffic on our beach area. And then also a shuttle that goes around the beach that could pick up from the City Hall parking lot, maybe the Winn-Dixie parking lot if necessary, and stop and pick up residents at specific stops to be able to take them to the beach where, for instance, some of our elderly residents or residents that just aren't comfortable walking with their children on our tiny streets to the beach, if they could pick up a shuttle and not have to drive their car down to the beach because they're only 3 or 4 blocks away, it would really enhance the safety on our beach area.
Would you put the shuttle service, would that be sponsored by the city, or would that be a public-private partnership, or what? How do you envision that?
I could envision it definitely being a type of partnership, probably between, that should be with some of the hotels in the area, but I think the city should also sponsor it to some degree, because as I've talked with residents, they like the idea of a shuttle, but they think it would be a good idea if the city sponsored it, and if there was a resident card, some kind of resident ID that gave you a discount on it. If tourists paid $1 and residents would just show that they're a resident and paid like a sort of a pass. That said they get the ride for 50 cents or instead of $1 or something. So the residents still feel like it's really helping them, but it's that the tourists are paying a little bit more for it.
For the convenience.
But it should be something that's balanced.
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. What about the amendments? How do you feel about I guess we have 5 amendments for just the city of St. Augustine Beach on the ballot this year.
In the primary, there had been a couple of the charter amendments that I was really concerned about. They all passed. In the general election, there's only one of the amendments, the 5 that's left in the general election, that I do have a concern about how it's worded. All of the others are very good at how they're worded to update what we need our charter to say. The one charter amendment that I do have a concern about is where it lists putting the chief of police under the city manager's realm and control. And in a business outlook, I don't have a problem with putting the chief of police under the control of the city manager, rather than under 5 bosses. He'll now be under 1, and it's still, major decisions still have to go through the approval of the commission, but his direct supervision is through the city manager's office. My concern that I do have, and I brought up at the last meetings when they were preparing the charter amendment plan, is that in the original charter, it does state that the chief of police makes the decisions over his department as to the number of police officers, their duties, and everything. And all of that is eliminated from the proposed change, and it just says the chief of police is under the supervision of the city manager. And it doesn't give any definition to the chief of police's responsibilities and duties. And that does, because of the recent past issues with our police department and how things swayed back and forth between the commission and the police department and the city, it does concern me, because I do believe having a police department full-time in our city is really important. I live on the east side of Beach Boulevard on the beach, and there are times, because we do have college students and younger people renting some of the properties there, that it's important to be able to call, and at night we still get the county dispatch, but it's important to know that when we call for dispatch, that we have officers right there in the beach that will respond within 2 or 3 minutes, and that's how quick they respond. And so it's a concern of mine that there is no wording in there that really defines that the chief of police is the person that makes the decisions for his department. All of that still would go under approval of a city commission, but when it doesn't say anything at all about him having responsibility for his department, it leaves it open for great interpretation by future officials of the city. And that concerns me.
So if a citizen were asking you, would you recommend then voting no on this one for
On that issue, if somebody truly asked for my recommendation on that issue about the police chief, I would have to recommend that, I would have to say that I personally am voting no. I think everybody should vote their own conscience on all the issues, but I will tell people what I'm voting on it if they ask, which I just did.
Great.
From the outside looking in, there's been an issue at the beach for a long time. It seems to me that every commission finds some way to keep sidestepping. It's a noise ordinance. You got any thoughts on that?
I've been a music teacher all my life. I'm a musician.
Are you a loud music teacher?
Well, I'm a drummer.
Ooh, but we know where you stand, don't we?
However,
Okay.
as I just stated about knowing that when you call for the police, call the dispatch, you know that they'll respond when we have officers in our city. I believe there is a need for specific restrictions on noise, how far it should carry, how loud it should be heard in other properties, specifically residential properties. I do agree that some businesses really would have a difficult time with some business without having entertainment and how they're set up. But there is a guideline to how far the sound can be heard. However, I can also say on the beach, with our beach breezes, I live a little over a quarter mile from the pier, and there are times when I can sit on my rear deck, which is on the south side of my house, and still enjoy the music from the concerts at the pier. And that's fine because they're 7 to 9 o'clock. There have also been nights when the wind's coming the other direction, and I'm more like 3/4 of a mile away from another establishment that has music, and I can hear the music coming from their establishment, but I do realize it also has to do with how strong the breeze is, the humidity in the air, there's a lot to how sound carries in the air. But so an ordinance has to be, we do need a sound ordinance, but it needs to be very clearly written about how the enforcement is done. And the times and the difference between how it is enforced for noise from a residential property and noise from a business that has a permit for the music within their specific hours of operation. For instance, the Pier, those are all under a specific application for events. Those are events permits. Some of the businesses, there's one of them that I very clearly know has the music going pretty late at night. There are others that could have asked for variances or event or permits to have music up until a certain time. Then it's up to the commission to approve it and specify. For instance, there is a business that has permitted their operation for unamplified music, supposed to be just acoustic music. But there are also the ones that have full bands playing. And then it's whether it's inside or outside, but then it doesn't. We do need a noise ordinance that allows some control. I began to carry on a little bit about that, but
That's just about what everybody else said too. It's very confusing.
During the budget tightening, of course, a lot of departments collapsed somewhat, and we didn't really have a code enforcement full-time, especially on weekends when it's needed the most. Do you foresee that department or that position expanding in that role? Or would that be like a police type of thing?
I do believe we really do need to look a little stronger at how our code enforcement is done. I know of, counting in my head as I've been going around knocking on doors campaigning, I've found 3 very derelict properties, 2 of which neighbors pointed out and talked to me about, and 3 or 4 others that have are clearly not occupied and not regularly cared for. And I'm sure there's more because I haven't yet made it to every street in our city in my door-to-door campaign. But I am concerned about our code enforcement and the teeth to it. And I believe that does need to be a little more strongly enforced. And I know that we do have a code enforcement board that's a volunteer board. But I do believe there does need to be some points on our code enforcement that maybe steps to the next step of having police enforcement or more specific steps further than just a fine. Because there are 2 properties that I have seen and had neighbors talk to me about that one is under foreclosure. The owner does still live in St. Johns County, but doesn't come over and take care of the property at all. It was there where a family member had passed away a few years ago, and they've just let it go. And another is owned by somebody out of state that hasn't been there in a while, and same thing, has let it go. And even though there's been fines currently assessed under our current code enforcement policies, nothing's changed. Nothing else is getting done to keep it safe and make it at least not detract from the values of the neighborhood. And I believe there needs to be a little further steps in how we set up our code enforcement, definitely.
Obviously, the pier needs to be replaced, basically. How would you, as a city commissioner, lobby the county to get that fast-tracked?
The fact that so many events are held at the pier, not just by the city and the Civic Association, although the Civic Association is the number 1 group that holds events at the pier with the concert series. And those events bring thousands of people to the pier. I do believe our visitors that come to those events also bring many thousands of dollars into our tax base. It should be a very strong issue to be able to make our pier number 1 point or a very high-ranking point in the county's list of projects to be completed. Not only the pier itself, but even the pavilion where events are held. And in the last year, they've done a few things to improve it because there were some issues with the power and things with the concerts there, because I was part of the Civic Association board for a time. But I believe with the number of events that are held there, especially by the city and the Civic Association, we do have a very strong commitment to making it a top issue to have the pier brought up to the standards that we should have for our county and our city.
Rate Max Royal for me.
He has been our city manager for 25 years. That was just in our Beaches Journal. His article in the journal was about the fact that he's been was it July, I think, he was his 25th anniversary as our city manager. He still gets the job done. This is the first time that this has come out. Somebody asked me really about that. I will say, I would like to see us have a city manager that is more proactive on a number of issues.
Such as?
Technology for our city, enforcement of some issues that are under his purview to control, updating our policy manuals. Like the police department finally is updating their policy manuals, but I'm very sure for the rest of the city's departments, there are a lot of things that could be brought much more up to date. Efficiency in our city offices. There are a lot of things that are done very efficiency. Our budget director is very good, and it was with the advent of Mr. Royal going to the last League of Cities convention that pushed a lot on technology. It was a pleasant surprise to actually see Mr. Royal talking about technology, because he was never really strong personally on using it. He'd like to see the city do what was needed in it, but has been times when he passed duties that he could be doing on some technology off to other people, because he's just old-fashioned.
I hate that.
I believe there are other things that the city could be doing that he could take a much more proactive stance on. One of the things that I think is important for St. Augustine Beach to look into doing is something that St. Augustine has done for ages, is annexing and bringing more property that's on our border into the city. In the last 5 years, if I looked at information right, the city of St. Augustine's annexed over 100 properties in the last 5 to 7 years. It expands their tax base and expands the city limits. The city of St. Augustine Beach has never... We annexed Watson Realty because they voluntarily asked for annexation. We annexed where the Winn-Dixie property was built because when they were building it, they wanted to build it under our codes. Other than those two properties, in the time that I've been in the city and involved in political aspects with the city, I cannot think of anything else, any other properties that the city of St. Augustine Beach has annexed. And there are some properties that I think would be beneficial to the city to have part of the city. And there are properties that our city services could provide a little benefit for. It just takes somebody with the city being proactive about stepping out.
Is it like an invitation, or you just take them? I mean, I really don't know how that works with the city. Can you just annex somebody?
In Florida, you can't. You do have to get them to voluntarily agree to become part of the city. With the exception of, for instance, if a city has been growing and they grow all the way around a property to where there's nothing around that property except city properties, it can be a forced annexation. But St. Augustine Beach doesn't have that. But in Florida, because I have looked into it, it's one of my background issues that I have thought about, that there are areas that, why isn't this part of our city? And because of the interlocal agreement our police department has with the county, some of these areas right on our city border get the benefit of our police department showing up if there's an alarm or a call, but we're not getting the benefit of a little bit of their taxes for our officers showing up over there.
You mentioned events. I think in the last month I've read, and it was tabled at a city commission meeting, they're considering adding a $54,000 a year events position. Is that necessary since you have the civic association?
Well, the city does have a part-time events coordinator, and they did that for events like Beach Blast Off, which is not a civic association event, and some of the other events that the city does sponsor and put on that aren't part of the civic association. But he had been expanding his purview to also look at grant writing and some other things that would help our city. City of St. Augustine has a grant writer, has an events coordinator, has different departments, and they are a much bigger city with a bigger population. But if we have somebody who's an events coordinator for bringing things into the city, it helps bring other events into the city other than what the civic association does. I did have an issue with looking at that he was going from a part-time position at, I think he was getting $19,000 at part-time, something like that. I don't remember the exact number. And it was going to be turned into a full-time position paying more than double. The job description that was sort of a rough job description that was provided for it included grant writing and other items. But I think it was a good thing that they tabled it to look at further, because it needs to have a specific job description, specific duties, and an understanding, a realization that that really does add up to a full-time position. Not paying somebody for a full-time position that really is only going to add another 10 hours a week to what he's doing. So
if you had to vote today, would you vote to add that position? Would that be a priority to add that?
at this moment, I would not vote to add that. If further research showed that it could build up to that, I would consider saying, okay, it's not just a flat 20-hour position, but we'll figure out the hour where if he works 25 hours, then we'll get it 25. If it gets to where he's working 35 or closer to 40 hours a week, and we're paying him on something hourly that doesn't add up to, I think on an hourly basis it shouldn't add up to what a regular salary would be. But if it gets to where on a full weekly basis he's actually pretty much putting in full time, then it maybe could be put down as a full-time position on our salary schedule.
What do you think differentiates you from your opponents?
Through my time in the city and through everything I do believe, it appears to me that I am a lot more involved in the goings on in our city. I'm out all the time. I go to as many of the concerts as I can go to. I helped with the beautification advisory committee when they were planting plants by the new 7-Eleven at 16th Street and State Road A1A on that side. I like helping with the Arbor Day ceremonies, and my wife was the chair of those ceremonies for a number of years with the beautification advisory committee, but she's not anymore, and we're still going to we like getting involved with the events that are going on. I go to the beach. I live 500 feet from the beach, so I get out to the beach anytime I can. I like to be involved in everything that's going on with our city, and maybe just different areas we live, because she could be as involved in things in the city as I am, but I have not seen it. I know that I really like staying involved with our city, and I believe getting involved on the commission again can help me improve things where a lot more of our residents can get involved with things going on in our city.
About our parks, of course, we acquired the nice Ocean Hammock Park. Some money was put into it last year to develop that somewhat. It's still relatively unknown. Everybody focuses on the parking. It's at the pier because it's there, and so there is other opportunities further south. And then, of course, we have the other park that is relatively unused right behind
The Hammock Dunes.
the public's parking area. How do you feel about those parks, and what would be your future plans with either of those?
I think it's wonderful that we were able to get those parks. I was part of the commission when Hammock's Dune, which was owned by the Ackersons, it was the Ackerson property, when the offers were made and the process was made to purchase that park. And that's one of the other projects that has sat, as the economy has been holding on as of something. We'd gotten the grants and the funding to purchase the park, and part of those grants included that we were going to put some passive usage to it. And I do believe we really need to look actively into putting a nature trail through Hammock Dunes Park, the one north of Publix. providing access to it and providing things that would inform people and educate people about that property, and the fact that that is one of that property, probably even more than the park closer to the beach, has more of our native beach animals and wildlife in it because it's a little more self-contained. There are the turtles and everything that are on the beach side, but I have seen around Hammock Dunes Park beach deer and some other animals that you won't see over on the beach side so much because they won't try and cross Beach Boulevard, especially because it does have that dune on the east side of that park. It sort of helps keep some of the nature inside the park a little bit better, but it's an area where people will get to see some of the natural habitat of our area without going truly into the wilderness part of it towards the intercoastal. But we could make it a park where people could see a lot more and go enjoy nature and learn things. And with the park on the east side with our parking lot, it's been in the plans, I know, to add bathrooms to it, to add more of a nature trail. I do look forward to the answer from the representatives that are talking to the owner, the new owner of that property, because I know it changed hands, about whether they'll still allow the Florida Nature Conservancy Trust to buy the rest of that property so that we can keep it all a nature preserve. But we do need to continue doing things to make it accessible for our residents to enjoy as a park, not just preserve nature that nobody can access. And for both of those parks, there does need to be a plan acted on. There has been designs that have been laid out, and then they sit because we can't get the commission or the planning and zoning board to take the steps to move on it. I would be a voice on the commission to take active steps on a few of these things that I have seen both current boards pass on something or be non-committal on something and pass it to the other board, where the other board sort of says, well, yeah, I think you should finish it up and pass it back to the other board, and things are going back and forth instead of somebody making a decision to say, we are the board that will act on this, we need to make a decision on this and make things happen now.
How do you think the board does? Is it effective if you join it? Would you be a collaborator, or how would you try to get everybody kind of singing from the same song?
The board, as it currently stands, has had times when things reach sort of a stalemate and aren't being effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I intend, if I'm elected to the board, to motivate forward action on some of the issues when things are reaching a point where they tend to sit. When I was on the commission before, I think we were a pretty active commission that year. Many things happened. Many decisions were well made. We all had our own voice and made things happen. But it was a little easier for me to be able to sit back, and there were times when people would say, "You barely set anything up at that meeting." Well, when I make a point always of reviewing the information well, so I knew the answers to what was going on, and then it was just the point of reaching the decision and making decisions based on the information that we were provided. And so I would tend to not want to make the meeting stretch on by doing a lot of talking, but I do know if I get on the commission, the things I will speak up about is making decisions move forward and not spend time getting off track from the issue we're working on. And I believe I would do very well at working with everybody else on the board. I have no issues with anybody else on the board that would make it a problem, make it a challenge.
Okay. Jim, do you have other questions?
No, I'm good.
Have we not asked you something that you want to talk about?
I think you asked a lot of really interesting questions, including a few that almost were unexpected. But I hope I gave clear answers to everything, that anybody that gets to see the video also, or anything that you write up from this is helpful. I will say I'm excited about the chance to serve our city again and do what's best for our citizens in our community and for our visitors. But most importantly, I want to be the voice of our residents for our community. I want to make sure we do things right for our residents and not fall into giving too much away. For instance, for both big developments coming in, although the Marriott development has been approved, it's still important to watch every step that they take through the design and construction of their development to make sure that it's still going to be something that our residents are happy with overall. Now, there's always the residents that are right behind the motel may never be happy with it, but it's a property that's overall already been decided on. We just may have to make sure that everything can be worked out in an amicable way that will work for everybody. But my most important aspect is doing what's best for those of us that love our community and live here. Because I've lived here for 22 years and I intend to live here for quite a few years more. That's where I stand.
Good deal.
Okay.
Thank you very much.